Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a great entry-level graphics card, and that would be this RX 570. And this is sort of going to start off a series of what recommendations I would be giving for what graphics card to buy at different price ranges, as well as different levels of experience with PC gaming. And we're gonna lead off this series sort of with like a starter card, entry-level PC type of build, where somebody may be building a PC for the first time and just trying to get into the PC gaming sphere. So let's go ahead and take a look at the highlights of this card and why it is probably a really good option for you if you're building your first PC, especially if you're looking to keep it on somewhat of a tight budget. Let's go. Now, right now, this particular RX 570 on Newegg is one of the cheaper, if not the cheapest, 570s out there. Now, there is an open box one over here that is a couple dollars cheaper than this particular one, but at $145 right now, this is about as cheap as it gets for a 570, and it's actually a pretty good looking card, unless, of course, you are trying to avoid red accents, which it does have one of those. It features an 8-pin connector for your power, which could be a drawback depending on what type of build you're trying to fit this into. Has a dual fan design, so it does run quite cool, and it does feature a very nice backplate, which again, if you're into aesthetics, this card is a winner in that regard, especially considering it's just that $145. Now, the reason that I am recommending this card over something like a GTX 1050 Ti is the 1050 Ti's are about as expensive, and this card in pure performance will outperform a 1050 Ti in virtually every single task. In fact, an RX 570 typically punches between a 1050 Ti and a 1060 on the NVIDIA side, so it sort of splits the difference there. And this card comes in at the same price as a 1050 Ti, or roughly the same price, at least as of recording, so there's no reason in my mind, or at least very few reasons in my mind, to get the 1050 Ti over the 570, and then the 1060s are a little bit more expensive than the RX 570s right now. So again, it depends if you're willing to pay a little bit more for the 1060, which does typically perform a little bit better. But if you're going to pay the little bit more for the 1060, suddenly you're looking at RX 580 territory in the price range anyways. And as you'll see in these charts, when you pair this card with a quad-core 8-thread Ryzen part like the 2400G in this case, you get exceptionally good frame rates in pretty much any game you're going to throw at it, and those benchmarks are all taken at the high presets or high settings. So if you are building a PC on a somewhat small budget, you're likely working with a 1080p monitor with a 60 Hz refresh rate anyways, so you're probably not going to be able to take full advantage of extremely high frames per second. So the 570 makes a lot of sense for a monitor like that, especially if you're trying to keep your costs down. Now, I did allude to the 1050 Ti potentially making more sense than the 570 in some cases, and the big one for me is if you buy a pre-built or you're working with a pre-built PC, maybe you already have one, chances are really strong that it does not come with the 8-pin connector that you're going to need for power to the 570, but most 1050 Ti's do not have any sort of auxiliary power coming from the power supply directly. Most of them just draw all their power through the motherboard, and also a lot of them are single fan designs, so they will be almost half as long as the RX 570, so they will fit in much smaller chassis. Most of the time they'll fit just fine into a mini tower pre-built like those Dell Optiplexes or other cases like that, where the 570 might struggle to make it in there. And now to sort of drive this point home, to build a PC featuring a 570, and this is a quad-core 8-thread PC with 8 gigabytes of RAM and a 570 in it, you only have to spend about $500, and that's going to get you a really solid power supply, or at least a somewhat solid power supply that gives you some upgradability, because this PC is also not a power hog whatsoever as it sits. And by the way, I'll leave the link to the PC part picker list down below in case you want to take a look at that more closely. But you have a Ryzen processor in a B450 board, so you're going to have upgradability when the 3rd generation Ryzen chips come out later this year. You have 4 slots for DDR4 RAM, so you can always add 8 more gigabytes to it. You get a chassis that's going to be able to handle this card just fine. You even get the OS included in the cost, which you can find those for about $10 on eBay and on other sites as well. So don't spend a lot of money on the operating system if you're running Windows. You can find cheap Windows keys around the internet, but all told, you're going to pay for the tower about $500. And if you're already looking for a monitor to go with the PC, because maybe you just don't have something you can plug it into with a keyboard and mouse, you might be looking at $650 to get up and running with a pretty budget-friendly monitor and some not overly expensive peripherals. But for a first-time PC builder, for somebody trying to build on a budget, this 570 is a great card to get you up and running at 1080p gaming. And really, I don't see a lot on the new market, at least, that competes with the 570 because it sort of creates its own performance bracket by one-upping the 1050 Ti, but falling just short of the 1060s and then also the 580s. And by the way, I did want to mention the reason that I didn't want to drop below the 1050 Ti RX 570 range is I really feel like the performance to the cost that you're paying for the card is much better for 570 than when you're dropping down to things like 1050s, or worst case scenarios, you're dropping clear down to things like 1030s or even RX 560s. I think there's a lot better performance for the price that you're paying in the 570. So if you're looking at those cards, my recommendation would also be to go ahead and save up a little bit more. Get yourself a 570 because then you won't have to upgrade nearly as soon as newer games that you may be playing come out. But that is just a compilation of my thoughts on the matter. If you have different thoughts about what a really nice entry-level gaming card would be, let us know down below. Maybe you completely agree that the 570 is the way to go, or maybe you think a 1060 or even a 580 would be a better point for launching if you're a PC gamer. But of course, those are all just my opinions. If you like this video, give it a like, share, subscribe if you really love the content. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. I'll leave that handle down below. And I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.